Alright, let's talk zombie survival sandbox, or I suppose zombie apocalypse simulator. Personally, I'm not the kind of gamer who obsesses over a single game and keeps playing it for thousands of hours. Except Project Zomboid. Well, not thousands, it's definitely well under 1,000 still, but in my Steam library it's the most hours by far. More than RimWorld even, more than Stardew Valley, more than Starbound, and even more than every Heroes of Might and Magic game combined. How did it come to this? Well, it's been a long time. I first tried out Project Zomboid when it was still 2D pixel art, pre-alpha back in 2011. A lot has happened since then. So many updates. The level of depth and realism has exploded. I find this is one of those cases where you have to distinguish between fun factor and addictiveness. Addictiveness is very high for me personally. Not as high as satisfactory. That was basically all addictiveness. I had to stop playing it after 2 weeks. 2 weeks of being obsessively glued to the screen. I knew it couldn't go on, I had to put an end to it. Anyway, I stumbled upon a video by Cassius Critiques and wanted to respond to a few of the points being made there. Link in the description, by the way.
Both in gameplay and in development, Zomboid feels incredibly directionless and absorbed by their scope that has ballooned so dramatically from where they began.
At first, I wanted to object to the first part of the statement, because I do think that it has had a direction the entire time, albeit a sometimes meandering one and a bit of a bumpy ride perhaps here and there. But the second part of the statement I can't argue with. And as the video goes on, I agree more and more for the most part.
Zombie apocalypse sim set in rural Kentucky where your main enemy is boredom.
Yeah, I can definitely see why you would say that. Personally, I would use the term tedium rather than boredom, but, you know, semantics.
Developers IndieStone feel like they prioritize in a way that is paradoxically both laser-focused and also completely random. Project Zomboid patches feel much more like whatever the developer felt like changing rather than changes that lead to a cohesive goal.
Well, I can partially agree with that. I mean, they tend to focus on particular things at a time. Like, for example, overhauling the aiming system and a homesteading update, basically. And of course, vehicles. That was such a big project that took a long time to do. It was quite ambitious because, of course, the engine was not originally designed, not built with vehicles in mind. So it took them quite a while to figure out how to do that and how to implement it properly. And in my opinion, they did a great job considering that it was kind of an afterthought, although a very important one.
They just come out and it's a mountain of changes that are largely unrelated and honestly mostly irrelevant.
Can't quite argue with that. I mean, there is a lot of changes that they've done that are very much relevant to the overall experience. But if you want to count things that contribute positively to the player experience, and particularly fun, that's a bit of a different story. There is a lot of time and energy being spent on questionable complexity. For example, making the character eat basically a literal truckload of grapes and they still lose weight. Interesting choice right there. I mean, the choice to introduce macros, have different food quality and all that, and give you a debuff for eating junk food. Yes, realistic, but not all realism actually adds anything. This seems to be a case of realism for its own sake, to make it more of a simulator, which, I mean, I guess that is the creative direction. That is the overarching goal. Clearly, you can question how much sense it makes and how good it is for the player, but that is clearly the direction that they have been going. And I guess that's also what makes the updates sometimes feel a little bit all over the place, but they are supposed to serve that ultimate goal, right? But sometimes you do have to scratch your head and wonder, like, why? I mean, some things are for gameplay balance. Some go a little too far in balancing. For example, the discomfort debuff for armor. It's like, okay, it makes sense. And it is a bit of a a downside to wearing armor, but we already had a downside. There was already the fact that it slows you down. It slows down the swing speed or the run speed or whatever. So that's already a thing. And in some cases, it might make the character too hot, feel too hot in terms of temperature. The discomfort is not really necessary, in my opinion. But on the upside, there's sandbox settings. You can change all of that yourself. You can turn that off altogether. The same as you can slow the rate at which the character gets hungry or the rate of clothing degradation or whatever. You can tweak just about anything, right? I mean, except fundamental gameplay mechanics, which is great. So anything you want to criticize about their design choices, you always have to keep in mind that there's a good chance that you can change all that.
Sometimes you will click a button, get jump scared by a massive screen with everything listed in great detail, and then barely be able to actually click on any of the elements because their UI is still based on what they built over a decade ago.
Yeah, the UI can be a little bit clunky depending on what state of development you're in. And even then, there's too many menus, there's too many data points. In some cases, they've just made it more of a hassle. Like this, having to open this liquid transfer menu. Now you can mix liquids. If you want 30% water, 40% vodka, and the rest milk, you could do that. Whatever bizarre reason. But then again, have you seen some of the cooking videos on YouTube and drink mixing videos? Yeah.
I have around 250 hours in Zomboid.
Cute. Times 3. Oh well.
Indie Stone might as well be in an arms race now with itself over whether or not to prioritize realism or fun.
No, I think they've always prioritized realism, frankly. It's kind of like in some cases, video game design has the goal of, well, fun, and it's supposed to be engaging and this and that. In this case, it seems more like the primary goal is realism and fun is the side effect. The benefit that you get along with it. Maybe, if you're that kind of player. But if you're not, why on earth would you play it to begin with, right?
They have all of these incredibly overcomplicated systems in service of, well, nothing, really?
There's so many elements that could be very easily condensed.
They're just there to be there. They've bothered to simulate individual temperature insulation values for every piece of your body, but none of that matters.
Yeah, I think the character can get frostbite on individual body parts, so there's that, but...
How could it? Throw on a couple pieces of clothing until the cold debuff goes away.
Yeah.
A simple max acceptable temperature value like RimWorld would have served the exact same purpose and freed up so much dev time.
It would be a lot easier, yes.
There's an entire car mechanics screen where every piece of every vehicle is meticulously tracked.
Oh, don't get me started on that. This is another one of those things that can add something to the gameplay. Basically, it depends on which sandbox you like. If you're going with a later apocalypse setting, basically, where we're further into it and there are much fewer vehicles and they're in worse condition and all of that, then you have to find one that almost works and then find the parts that you need to replace because they're broken and all of that. And yes, that is part of the survival experience. I mean, plenty of sandbox games do that, but this can easily drag you into the bog of optimization. I've done that where I kept chasing it. First off, picking the best vehicle, however you define which one the best is, and then hunting after the right tires, the highest quality tires and suspension and brakes and oh no, now this window has a crack. I need to find a new one to replace it. And it is maddening. You can absolutely lose yourself in that and go crazy and then spend a whole lot of time on bullshit, quite frankly. That is just not necessary and and then you run into one lamppost and then you have to do the entire thing all over again because now your damn car has taken a lot of damage. So, yeah, this is too much. Not to mention, you have to first grind to even get your mechanic skill high enough to even be able to do more than remove the radio. You need to know how to do it. You need to have read the manuals. Oh, and reading books and all that. That's another big problem. It takes so long, even if you speed up time. And that's kind of generally the problem. Everything takes so much time while not being particularly rewarding, other than like the addictive part of like, oh, I have to do this. I'm hyper focused on this now. I have to do this. This game is like an ADHD trap, isn't it? It's just supposed to suck you in and just drive you mad. If you're playing multiplayer, then yes, you can split up tasks. Not everybody has to know everything. It helps a lot, but the problem with multiplayer is you cannot speed up time. Which, when trying to read books, I mean, just straight up forget about it. You will be sitting there literally for hours real time reading books. It's just pretty much not feasible in multiplayer. So, yeah, it is a giant time sink.
Taking a visit to your local parking lot with your handy-dandy industrial-sized lockpick will almost certainly net you a new vehicle.
Again, unless you're playing with different sandbox settings. Like the default experience, or one of the default experiences, generally vehicles are not going to be terribly rare. So, yeah, you're better off just taking a new one.
Despite being set in America, their implementation of Firearms just sucks. The game is set in the firearm capital of the world with at least one gun in every other house. Not a made-up statistic, by the way. This was the perfect excuse to have a really in-depth weapon customization system akin to, say, Tarkov.
Yeah, there is some customization. You don't have a ton of options, but you can. They have expanded on that. But this is also a good example of kind of a problem. Just recently, I started a new character with particular customized sandbox settings because I was getting kind of tired of this tedium of how slow everything is. So I changed it so that you get experience much more quickly. I kept the loot rarity at normal for everything except firearms and ammo, which I set to abundant. Because I wanted, for a change, I wanted to actually be able to run around with guns. Just to be like, oh, you want brain? Suck on this lead instead. And, well, I ended up using melee weapons quite a lot. Because even with the settings changed to abundant, you pretty much have to go to the gun shop. It's so rare to find firearms and ammo in houses. And again, rural America, I mean, there should be a shotgun in every other glove box. Don't question it. They do actually fit in glove boxes in the game. There should be AR-15s in closets and basements full of ammo. Sometimes you do find that. Sometimes you find a prepper home, clearly with a bunch of ammo stockpiled in the basement. But overall, it's still pretty rare, actually. You know, I mean, after a while, you will have gathered enough that you have a car full-ish of guns and ammo. But even when you try to make it more fast-paced, less tedious, and somewhat more action-oriented, there's only so much you can do. I mean, you can do a lot, don't get me wrong. There's so many sandbox settings, right? But some things...
And even if the buffs were minor at best, they're weapons, so you still get to feel like you're improving your arsenal, which gives you a long-term goal to play with. Instead, there are somehow almost no long-term goals whatsoever.
That's why I don't like this. This is how you died. It's kind of like that the game sets you up to think, whatever you do, it's pointless. Don't even bother. You know, like there's no... I mean, there doesn't always have to be resolution of some kind. And of course, sandbox games are open-ended. That's the point, that you just do your own thing and you pick your own challenges and you decide what you want to do. Has this cable been in the frame the entire time? Sorry about that. Anyway, so yes, you can set your own goals. You can make challenges for yourself. So it's not really that big of a deal, but the way it's framed seems to almost discourage that.
Fixing the firearm situation has instead fallen onto modders. Beta 42, released in...
The firearms are a lot better. Now this is, let me see, Okay, it's a year ago. They've improved it a lot. The aiming system is dramatically better than it was, and it's actually quite good now.
The last 3 years could have been spent on something entirely new. Let modders have their field day with the base that you laid down and move on to greener pastures.
I understand why you're making that point, but at the same time, I see the danger in kind of encouraging the Bethesda way of doing it. I mean, this is the opposite extreme, where they just release an unfinished, glitchy, buggy mess where the modders have to pick up the pieces and actually fix things and make the game enjoyable. So while I understand the point Cassius is making here, at the same time I think the developer Indie Stone deserves a lot of credit for their endurance. You know, just being willing to work on the same game for this long rather than just being like, well, we got the money, let's just drop it and start the next thing. It is definitely commendable that they keep sticking with it. And they have made a lot of really cool changes and really drastic changes. I mean, they could have given up before vehicles, and that would have been a major shame. And particularly seeing how good the aiming system is now, which they were struggling with for quite a while, that was definitely worth it.
They would have had, as of now, a spare 6.5 years to make a new game.
Well, you know, if they had been making Project Zomboid 2, 6.5 years would have gotten us to, what, Alpha?
A credit where credit is due. The introduction of animals is a pretty impressive step, but tell me, how many players do you think are actually going to interact with this system?
I tried and I gave up on it. Yeah, it's too much. You know what's worse? I loved the addition of blacksmithing. I was quite excited about that. I wanted to do it. I wanted to figure it out. I gave up before I got there. Because it is such a pain in the ass to find or make an anvil and a bunch of other tools and then build the smithy. It takes so many resources and it takes so much time. It almost reminded me of Haven and Hearth, which is one of the worst time sink rabbit holes I've ever fallen into. The idea of forging swords to slice up zombies with is great, but I ended up just using the console to spawn a few of them to try them out because it's too much. It's just too tedious.
Modders are willing to take shortcuts to make systems happen in a reasonable time frame, instead of going out of their way to do what the Indie Stone have said on multiple occasions that they plan to do with this system, which is to simulate the lives of each and every NPC.
I respect the ambition, but at the same time, I do have to wonder why. And when is this going to happen? 2032? It really just feels like realism for its own sake, because same as with the, you know, protein and fat and carbs and all of that. Like, who cares? There are more points being made in the video. You can watch it yourself. Link in the description below. The thing is, I've enjoyed a lot of these changes, at least for a while, and that's kind of the thing. I tend to stick with it for a while for the novelty, really, because Project Zomboid does so many things that no other game has done before, that no other developer has dared to do it in such excruciating depth, right? Which is, again, it's commendable. I respect that. It's cool. But past the novelty, there's only some things that I like to stick with. The rest just gets excessive. Elements of realism, when done right, in the right kind of game, for the right audience, can work perfectly well. Can, you know, enhance the experience and make it more enjoyable and everything. Or it can be a massive time sink and you just sit there asking yourself, why did I do that? Why did I just spend the last 3 real-time hours tinkering with cars just to make my vehicle perform just slightly better, only to ditch it a couple of in-game days later when it just gets torn apart by zombies? Again, a lot of criticism can be shut down by simply pointing to the sandbox settings, of which there are plenty. You can customize almost every aspect of the game, other than the core mechanics. but the core mechanics will still bite you in the ass in a number of ways. Right, so yeah, there is definitely, absolutely such a thing as too much realism. And I wonder if it's gone too far in general, like the focus on realism in the gaming industry at large. I wonder if it's gotten a little out of hand. You know, as someone who can appreciate elements of realism, again, in the right kind of game, I do think it's a bit much. Ultimately, I prefer Elder Scrolls over Kingdom Come Deliverance for that reason. The fact that, you know, atmosphere and fun is more important than accuracy and realism. Anyway, let me know what you think about all this, about the video, about Project Zomboid. You know, anything else you would like to add? Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and don't get bit.